Okay, good morning, afternoon, evening, or whatever might the time be when you actually view this video recording. Um, I'm coming to you from Reading, and I hope that everybody is feeling well enough that you've been able to avoid the sickness and maybe even been able to communicate well with your other teachers and get all your work in that you need to do so that we're not going to school until the end of June. Um, Anyways, moving forward, as you were told, following the midterm, we'll be entering a new unit, and this unit is on nonfiction. Following that unit on nonfiction, we'll be entering into our last unit, which will be composition, where you will complete your final through the work of a research paper. A little bit more information on that as time passes by. Right now, we're going to be working with nonfiction texts, mainly articles that I have provided for you, ranging from many different types of themes and topics. And the reason for this variance is so that you can have a pretty good understanding of nonfiction in many different forms. For the most part, these articles are going to be relatively short. The culmination of this unit will be working with the 2020 presidential election. I find it to be kind of an interesting thing that since we are in an election year and we're working with nonfiction in this class, that reading up on the 2020 election would benefit us in more than just one way. We could actually accommodate for some things that are directly affecting us in the world. And that's really where the realm of nonfiction kind of exists, in this kind of information and news milieu. So, without further ado, I'm gonna go over some strategies that would help you to better understand nonfiction writing and reading as well. Don't worry, we're not reading any books. You might see that there are some techniques and strategies to reading nonfiction books, such as if they're historical fiction or a series of books on the history of maybe countries or events or eras and such. We're mainly going to stay in the realm of articles and journals. So short bits of reading followed by short bits of writing, and hopefully sooner rather than later we will be working on doing class discussions through Google Classroom in the comments section. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that as we get to that slide. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So one of the first things you're going to want to look at when you're engaging in nonfiction sources is to review the text features. Now, text features can be a number of things that you see on a web page or a sheet of paper or a pamphlet or a brochure, whatever it might be. And it always starts with a title. One of the most important text features to recognize is the title. So whenever you're doing a word search or a Google search or whatever it might be, mostly the keywords will be associated with the title. After that, you're gonna want to make sure that you can identify graphics that are used as text features, especially on websites, bullet points, keywords, words that might be bolded or highlighted, the index that might be included, table of contents, which is a little less popular, especially nowadays in the intellectual world. You don't see too many table of contents, but headings would be a little bit more reliable as your sort of table of contents. If an author is using headings, that's kind of a predetermined table of contents within the text itself. Sometimes you will have glossaries to help you out. If not, there are online resources that act as glossaries, such as dictionary.com. Headings and subheadings, kind of like what I said about the table of contents, graphs, charts, and maps. So those types of things that kind of grab your attention right away would be considered the text features before you actually start getting into the bulk of the text. Text predictions. So kind of like inferences that we did with fiction, a lot of our assignments had inferences, topics and discussion points that made you have to guess or predict what might be coming next. Using your text features predict what you will be reading about. I think I will learn dot 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 because dot dot dot. So based on the text features that you see, you're able to kind of make predictions before you even start reading. Just like in a book, if you're reading a fiction novel and you were following along with the plot, you'd be able to kind of predict what might be coming next. We used inference quite a bit with The Great Gatsby for honors, especially. And I would associate inference for the Lit Comp students with their individual novels and how a lot of your questions were asking you to make an inference. But for nonfiction, it would be actually prediction, simply put. Evidence-based questioning. So we are working with strictly evidence and facts here. Moving away from the realm of fiction, we're starting to become a little bit more concrete. So carefully read any evidence-based questions for the text. Locate the answers by highlighting or underlining text evidence. So when you get assignments that are geared towards these articles and journal entries that I will be giving you, the questions that I ask in those assignments are oftentimes evidence-based, right? So you're actually going to be researching into where an author might be getting his or her information, and that's important to understand. And that's one of the reasons why highlighting and underlining textual evidence is so crucial, so that you can actually see the thought process of the author as you're moving through nonfiction works. Text coding, a pretty interesting technique here. This would be a little bit more readily helpful if you were going to be working with hard copies. I am going to spend some time on this just in case for the future reference if you ever do find yourself in a class situation where you're working with hard text, hard copies, because text coding can be quite helpful for you. So one strategy that you can use is text coding. It takes a little while to learn, but it is useful and sort of looks like a secret message when you are done. So these different symbols that are listed down here, they can vary from person to person, obviously, but a lot of the common themed ones would be when you want to identify points in a text that you might want to refer back to very quickly without having to reread. Obviously, text coding would help you with that time frame, especially when you go to write your research paper and you're using text coding for your references. This could be extremely helpful instead of having to reread information that you've already taken in. So make it easy on yourself. Text coding is quite helpful, especially with hard copy sources. Post-it note prioritizing, once again, is kind of like text coding. Usually you would only use the actual physical post-it notes if you're working with hard copies. I know that you can have apps or there are certain ways to view material that allows you to do digital post-it noting. But one thing that post-its allow you to do is without using text coding, it gives you more of a summative way to look at materials. And so place a post-it note on each section or paragraph of text and write down the important information from each section. So you're basically capturing the topic sentences or even some of the meat of a paragraph and summarizing it maybe in bullet points or one sentence, once again making it easier to kind of digest the material. Okay. A word splash. So sometimes I will give you a word splash is basically kind of like a word bank. It gives you kind of key terms to keep an eye out for. This will occur occasionally for me. I might highlight certain terms for you, and that would be kind of like your word splash. Here's a keyword that you're going to want to refer to in that short paragraph while you're predicting what is being said, right? And then you can use those splash words or those keywords to compare and contrast your prediction for what you're going to read, right? So going back to those text features where you're using those bold words, word splash is basically the makeup for those bold words, okay? Graphic organizers. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be giving you guys certain handouts with kind of graphic organizers built into them, and I'll explain that in a moment. And a lot of the times when you're doing nonfiction, especially when you're digging for evidence, you want to use kind of fact-based strategies. So cause and effect, compare and contrast, or a web it. So when you create a web, a thought web, where there's like this central theme and then it branches out with different forms of evidence, you could use graphic organizers like this or the ones that I provide for you. So cause and effect, drawing an arrow from one point to another. Compare and contrast, that can be like Venn diagrams, or even you make a T-chart. There can be a number of ways that you go about creating your own graphic organizers if the ones that I provide aren't as helpful. All right, so please be as resourceful as you can when it comes to finding ways to analyze texts. A Wordle, you can create a Wordle to highlight the key points or vocabulary. It's kind of like a word splash. Once again, you're just kind of putting all these terms together and associating the main idea with all the different keywords. So it's just an artistic way to kind of show what you've discovered. This could be really helpful as far as if you were ever to give a presentation on a nonfiction piece or groups of works, and it could be a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. We're not going to be doing presentations for the nonfiction unit for obvious reasons, that we're not in the classroom. It'd be very hard to manage it, but also it could be a lot more time consuming, and I want you guys actually working with texts. Newspapers as informational text. Once again, the newspaper itself as a industry has shifted to the digital landscape for, once again, more obvious reasons. We will be dealing with some texts that come out of newspapers or journals. So we will be looking at newspapers that are digital but relevant and timely. They can help you to stay informed on events around the globe, and they are often online, free, and accessible. You can use your strategies to help you understand when you're looking at a newspaper article. A lot of the stuff that we're going to be looking at is opinion oriented. Sometimes we're going to be in the opinion column or even the student opinion column. We're going to be looking at writers that might be even your age and how that they work within the realm of the newspaper world. So hopefully that would garner some interest and be fascinating to you. So that's about it from there concerning different strategies you can use. You can replay this video, go back to the list, and see if there was anything that you might want to look into a little bit more. But right now, I do want to tell you kind of what the strategy, well, not the strategy, but the format of what the assignments are going to be moving forward, especially this week. Next week, that would be March 31st through April 3rd. The format will be a little bit different, but as far as March 24th to the 27th this week, please keep an eye on the Google Classroom. Your assignments will be posted there. We're going to be working with 3 different articles. I'm just going to preview the first one, and then you can see the assignment on the Google Classroom at a later time. So just for today, I'm recording this on for March 24th. Just for today, just make sure you view this lecture and refer back to it, especially if you have any questions about how you're going to go about answering the questions that come out in the assignments. All right. So what I'd like to do now is just kind of show you the format of the assignments. What I call this is I'm calling it a CEAR, C-E-A-R, which it stands for Current Event Article Reflection. And the format is something like this. You won't exactly see this every time, but it'll have kind of a similar structure. So when you go to an article that is plugged in with this kind of CEAR, make sure that before you read the article, you look at the CEAR. It's going to give you what you're looking for, and then you can fill in a lot of these questions, these answers to these questions before you even start reading. So for example, here's the first sections before you read. So you're going to look at the title, you're going to look at the heading, you're going to comment a little bit on what you might already know about the topic, if anything. Uh, see,